Everybody see that? Cool. Thanks everyone for taking the time to join today. Thanks for having me, Richard. I thought I'm always, didn't want to just do like a work presentation, and really like always thinking about new ways of kind of understanding the work that we're doing, because a lot of times it just happens intuitively and you don't quite understand what's happening, and then you look back on it and it looks a little different. But I thought I'd take the opportunity today to like really, in light of the situation with the pandemic and the way that we've all been kind of forced out of balance with digital and physical space, and really like had to kind of experience the painful deficiencies, I don't know, at least for me, of being in digital spaces. I thought it'd be cool to look at some of our work through that lens of like digital and physical space, and how they can inform each other and kind of interact in a lot of different ways. A really quick history of Soso. In some sense, we've always had like our hand across digital and physical spaces. We got started working with Dave Small, who's on the call, doing a lot of really like amazing work for interactive museum exhibitions around the world. And while we were working for Dave, we were moonlighting as kind of a VJ group, basically. We had like a monthly at a local club in Cambridge. And in the course of doing that, developed some really like sophisticated software for remixing media on the fly. And that kind of eventually turned into Soso, and you'll see kind of that practice diversified into a whole bunch of different things along the way. Keynote's doing something very bizarre here, but okay, there we go. So yeah, I think like this idea of like working across digital and physical spaces, I think there's a lot of interesting ways that they can inform each other. And whether it's applying the kind of bodily knowledge we have and the architectural knowledge we have to working in a digital space, and really like learning how to give digital spaces structure, and a structure that like a body can actually understand. And I think going the other way and taking some of the newness and the freshness and the freedom of working in a digital space and superimposing that back on physical spaces, and seeing what comes out and what new kinds of experiences you can produce. And I think one thing to really like think about is like, no matter what form your digital experience is taking that you're creating, people are always experiencing it with their body. And so I think like that becomes a really big theme in our work for sure, is like understanding like what is your body doing when you're experiencing something, and like how to design the pacing of it and the scale of it, and how to work with actual bodies, even if it's quote unquote purely digital. So I'm going to walk through a bunch of projects and really just like kind of talk about them through that lens of working across these two spaces. The first project that that really started Soso was this live debate remix. And basically we took the presidential debates live as they were happening in 2008, created this software to deconstruct them and put them back together on the fly, and then in front of live audiences here at the ICA as one of the shows. We created these live remixes. And so it was like this kind of mashup of space, in that these live things were happening thousands of miles away, and then people were getting together in a public space for an event that normally they'd be working together in a living room in a private space, and really like kind of explode in the informational space of the debate. So
President Ahmadinejad, he did not say that. He said that there could be secretary level and lower level meetings. I've always encouraged them. The Iranians have met with Ambassador Crocker in Baghdad. We suffered defeat in Iraq, which General Petraeus predicts we will, if we adopted Senator Obama's set date for withdrawal.
Not worked in North Korea.
So this piece is really about like, in some sense, like information overload, and like taking all the things that are there, all the information that's there in the TV stream that you don't normally catch, and visualizing it in a way that you normally couldn't see when you're just watching TV. And a lot of these visualizations were like really spatial, like we actually did it for the prime minister debates as well. And like, this was one of the visualizations where it was just these like keywords building up this kind of linguistic like landscape. And so a lot of the way we were thinking about, visualizing this information was just really like architecturally and physically spatial. And then of course, like language has its own, grammar of space and structure. And I think so much of this piece was about visualizing language and kind of figuring out how to like turn language into this three-dimensional world you could navigate. So fast forward, maybe, I guess, 8 years after that piece, this is a totally different side of the practice. And a Kinetic Sculpture, we collaborated with 2 other groups, Plebeian Design and Hypersonic Engineering and Design, to create this piece. And basically, like, we were working with the developer, and they gave us this huge open atrium in this building in Kendall Square in Cambridge. It's a beautiful space, sunlight, sunlight coming in from the ceiling, but it was just really inhuman, like a kind of cavernous space. And it's a life sciences building, a bunch of pharmaceutical companies in there. And so the developer asked us to create something both to kind of humanize the space, but also to speak to the work that was going on in the building. And so the idea was to create a sculpture that could appear and disappear from thin air to really preserve all these beautiful sight lines, and to kind of like create this sense of motion in the space. So it's a sculpture made out of 400 of these kind of origami elements that are each controlled by a different motor and can open and close in response to a simulation. And the simulation is actually just a bunch of invisible birds flocking through the space. And so when they kind of pass by these elements, they open up and close. And the idea was really to like both create something physically beautiful and enrapturing, but also manifest this idea of like collaboration in science, like through the idea of flocking birds. And one thing with this project is working with this scale was like really challenging, because you're designing software in parallel with actually prototyping the physical pieces and building mock-ups. And it's really hard to like get a sense of like the scale of the piece until it's actually built and actually made. And so that's actually one thing I wanted to talk a little bit about, is like, when you're designing for physical space with digital tools, how do you give your body that sense of presence? And so, one of the things is we're always creating these kind of 3D visualizations. So this is the view of the software we use to actually design the piece. Of course, like the form of the piece itself was all driven by parametric designs, grasshopper scripts and things to like create this regular grid. And then we decided at some point that, thinking about different forms in the space, oh, this is actually a pixel display, right? It's a physical pixel display. And so taking that metaphor of just a pixel display where the pixels can kind of like go from 0 to 1, a grayscale display, and making that physical was really like the metaphor that drove the whole piece. So we created this box, and within the box of elements, these really beautiful motions can unfold. The pacing of this, I mean, you've all probably found like working in software, you tend to just speed things up because you want to see it move and you want to test it, but also the scale of your screen is so tiny. And I think the rule is like half the speed of it. If it's going to be physical and big, start by having the speed that you probably think it should be, and that's where you should start. And in the end, this it's a flocking algorithm, but like slowed down by like maybe 1/10 speed. And the day I remember we turned the thing on, the building was empty because it was a holiday. Like my whole like breathing slowed down, and it was this moment of like, wow, like we were really trying to make something calming and beautiful and reflective, but like so much technology, so much design and engineering went into this piece that actually had this effect of like embodying people and like slowing people down. And ever since this piece, I mean, to some degree, it was intentional. To some degree, we got lucky with it, the way it makes people feel. But it's been something that I think I've started to more deliberately go after in our projects. So this is an example of a work that actually grew out of thinking about language and color, And we had done a bunch of other experiments around language and color. I'm going to share one of them in a bit, but this idea of like just giving something a seed, giving an algorithm a seed of a phrase and having it magically respond to you with either textures or colors. And a developer asked us to create a piece for this hallway. It's in the Hancock building in Boston. And they really wanted something that would engage the tenants in the building, who are mostly like finance people, a lot of finance people. And so the idea we had was basically to use everyone, they all have cell phones in their pockets, and to use the cell phone and specifically text messaging as an interface. So there's a number on the wall, and anybody can text message a phrase or an emoji or anything to this piece, and it responds with a totally unique color palette that really fills the space with light. So it's like, you know, it's built on a very powerful artificial intelligence algorithm called Google image search, basically. And, you know, we get back the results and pull apart the pixels and turn them into this color palette. And I think the thing about this is like, really like through a digital space, giving people the ability to transform the physical space that they're in. That became like a really powerful aspect of the piece. And in some sense, like having a conversation with the room, because the sculpture texts you back, it kind of like lets you know when your colors are going to be displayed. And so it starts a conversation between the space and you. And it's really fun because it's your secret, you know, like no one else knows who you texted it, except we have the server log so we could see what people were texting it. And we, you know, we were a little bit scared at first what people might text it, but in the end, it ended up being this like, people will text it like little inspirational messages on the way into work, like, you got this, man, like before a presentation or something, or like, and so it just like, it really surprised us the kinds of things that people were sending to it. And then again, I tried to show a screen for every project where to look at how this was created. And, you know, this piece was developed basically through this interface, you know, like a bunch of colored lines on a screen, and really just like trying to understand the pacing and the scale of that as we were going. And like, you didn't need to make complicated animations or moves. It was really just about this beautiful long hallway and sweeping it full of color. And just that like delight of like sending it a phrase and like, and seeing such a big transformation in a physical space. So this piece actually came before that last piece. And so Lauren McCarthy, working on P5.js, and was doing a little fundraiser and asked us to collaborate with Print All Over Me, which is this clothing online digital print company. And they're amazing. You should check them out. You can print anything on clothes. And so we took that idea of like giving it a seed of language, which anybody could do, and then reinterpreting that as, you know, clothing patterns. And so the same kind of thing here is where like, we're kind of like averaging and interleaving all the pixels. So you're preserving some level of meaning. You're preserving the color. And like, sometimes you see like Nicki Minaj, you could kind of see her face. It was kind of scary as the election approached and you search for Trump, the shirts would get more and more orange because he was just like appearing more and more in the news. And so it has this like really cool thing where every time you search it, it might look a little different because of the way that the image algorithm is pulling things up. And, you know, this was, again, this interaction between, you know, I don't think too many people besides us like printed up clothing, but I think a lot of people ended up playing with the algorithm. But this idea that by simply providing what's on your mind and just kind of like having a conversation with this algorithm, that you can design your own clothing and have it hold some kind of like secret meaning to you. It felt really powerful to us. We did a kind of remix of the project for Microsoft for a campaign they did, and developed some more patterns. We worked with Todd Vanderlyn on a lot of the like generative algorithmic stuff. So this piece, a project we did with the Museum of Contemporary Art in San Diego, they got a grant to basically engage young people, around their permanent collection in the native digital spaces that people actually like inhabit. And so this is like a really cool challenge to try to basically connect people to this physical collection of artwork, but do it again, in the places that people are already playing and working. And so the concept here was like to try to basically solicit interpretation of the artwork from the entire community, and then to actually fold that back into the collection and make that part of the collection. And so we had this concept of like trying to collage people's images with artwork. And that led to, because of a bunch of different reasons, including image rights, you can't really mess with, artist images and like put them in collages. And so we kind of came up with this relatively simple idea where we give each artwork a feed and a prompt. So it might be the museum could come up with these prompts. They might be like, how does this artwork taste? Or like, what does this artwork remind you of? Or what would you title this artwork? And you could go onto the site right now. It's react.mcsd.org. And you can answer the prompt with an image or with text. And then we created this kind of like collage-like system where like you just scroll up through all the responses, and they're taking colors from the painting, from the artwork, so that each feed has its own like unique identity. And it just became this really simple, powerful way to connect the physical collection. And then when they show the work, they'll put a little QR code next to it, and people could scan it and go to the page and share their responses. So it was this really beautiful way of like folding a physical collection in a digital space and then putting it back into the museum. And they've really continued to use it and build on it. And we're doing some more work with it around it right now. And so back to kind of the comment I made in the beginning about body. I think actually the first time I met you, Richard, you were checking out one of these vibration pieces that I had made up in Cambridge. And so this is a kind of a whole different like line of work, but it comes out of this idea of like, how can we use the space of the sense of touch and the physical space of the body to create these new experiences using simple digital tools. So it's called a seated catalog of feelings, and we had the opportunity to redesign it and make it more accessible and really like kind of step it up for the Senses show at the Cooper Hewitt Museum like 2 years ago. And the idea is there's these totally nondescript chairs. You walk up, you sit down, and you put headphones on, and one by one, a voice as well as a text on the floor describes a sensation. And then shortly after, you feel it in the seat of the chair. And so it's like this really incredible thing happens when you sit down and put on the headphones, and almost everyone has this response to like close their eyes and go inside. And I'm going to flip to a list of some of the things so you could get a feel for them. Some of them are like really banal, like an apple getting sliced or butter on toast. Some of them are, strange, like falling backwards into a tub of Jell-O. There's some kind of macabre ones, like the last nail in your coffin, or driving over a dead body, or getting inflated and twisted into a balloon animal. And I think thinking about the piece in terms of space, like this is the view that I had like developing the piece. And really it's a sound space, kind of working in some sense it's a digital space, because using digital tools to design the sound for this piece. But then the end result is this like very physical experience. And it was just like, it's really powerful to kind of see how those spaces connect and overlap. This got me so excited. This one visitor came up to me and asked me, there's one of the sensations was like a fly on dog shit. And he asked me, am I the fly or the shit? And it just kind of blew my mind, because the whole piece like was about like transformation and transporting. And like, there was this experience where he didn't know what he was for a moment. And I just got really excited about that. And I'm excited to explore that more. And so that brings me to the last thing I wanted to share. And when COVID dropped, we as a studio, we're really just trying to figure out how we could help the situation and contribute. And I think the thing that we realized was, as designers and coders and creative technologists, that we have this unique set of skills and ideas that can use technology to really bring people closer to each other and to themselves, and kind of not in a, not in a Facebook kind of way, but really thinking about how can we create these like embodied experiences that can connect people in a meaningful way. And so this project was kind of a collection of a lot of different activities, interviewing our friends who are doing amazing work in this space, and kind of getting their perspective, and creating a bunch of prototypes, and really just like kind of imagining how we could bring people closer together. So I just wanted to share two of these. The first one was, breath is something that, when we're in this physical space together, we synchronize in so many different ways. And you lose that because of the delay, you lose it because of not being, in the same room. There's no more, no more pheromones to respond to. And so, we imagine this experience of like, imagine on a call every 10 minutes, this screen comes up and it just invites everybody to take a few, deep breaths together. And there's some kind of graphic that's syncing you. And so we played with this and we did these experiments as a group, and I think it was it's often these simple kinds of things that can really help to like re-embody us in these, digital spaces. This one was really fun. This one is still up. It mostly works. It was like a really quick prototype. But the idea here was like, what happens when you can enter a common like altered sound space with a friend? And so you can invite, if you go to the site, you can invite a friend by sending the link, and you can both be basically like inside of a cathedral, and you could shout up into the cathedral, and I used it with a friend of mine, and he started singing and we started singing together, and it was amazing. And you could change the size of the room, so you could be in a big sound space, or you could be in like a kind of like a bathroom size space, and the acoustics change. And so and we found that like getting rid of the image and just focusing on sound, and then bringing that like physicality of like the reverberation of a space into the experience was just like so powerful. And so I encourage you to like try it out with a friend. Hopefully it still works. And then the last thing one of the other things we did was start to think about sports events. We collaborated with some friends of ours at Upstatement, another design firm, and really started to think around like sporting events, and like kind of with the idea of trying to pitch some ideas to some different leagues and teams, and like how you can bring that excitement into your living room, how you can bring the excitement of fans back into the space of the stadium. And there's been all kinds of different experiments happening around that now, since we did this work. Some of them effective, and I think some of them like super goofy. And we see it's fun to see what happens when people try to cross over these two spaces, and how like when you cling to too much to like a physical metaphor and you try to jam a digital thing in, how like awkward it can be. So I think there's still just so many opportunities here, and I think that's like been one of the biggest things for us, is like to to see what new opportunities that this whole pandemic can bring in terms of like new ways of interacting and finding ways of getting closer in digital spaces. Yeah, so I'll stop it there, and we could kick off the conversation.
Wonderful, thank you. Thanks, Eric. So first mini comment, you have a text panel on top of your presentation, the fonts panel. If you at all could get rid of that, that would be super helpful.
Oh, this one. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Is it?
And so for everybody who hasn't been at Cloud Salon, who only just joined, we very much would like this to be a salon, in the sense that we would like this to be an open conversation. So if you have any questions or things you wanted to discuss with Eric and Soso, please go ahead. You can write in the chat. You can also write directly to me if you don't want to broadcast to the whole group, or you can use the raising hand feature in the participants panel to just speak to the group. And there actually have been has been already a few questions in here. One question I had was, did you remix the debates this year?
We did not. We we sort of dropped that project. We tried a text only version of the project, like I forget what year that was, 2012. And then we decided that it was just so much work and to do at least the early ones, that we decided to let that project go. Yeah.
And I'm curious, I watched this Together Apart work that you did, and it was like you said, but I think it's hard to see in a presentation. You did all kinds of things, right? Talking to people and reading and many different prototypes that you created, and I loved all that work. Like, is there something that you would say that you have learned at this point, or new approaches that might be useful and helpful for other creative technology practitioners?
You know, I'm trying to pull out some of the big lessons. I think that it's not always like additive, like bringing more information is not always the way to connect people. Like higher frame rate, higher resolution video, it's not like, sometimes removing things can be the most powerful way of creating connection. I think that's like a really broad one. And I personally, like through these projects and through this process of like learning how to work together remotely, I think our team has gotten so much stronger, the way that we collaborate, and it's like forced us to communicate more. It's forced us to like find stronger ways of connecting. And so I'm like super excited to come out of this, like back into physical space and see how we could keep some of these habits going.
Can you give us an example?
I mean, so like, just using boards, and like we use Figma so much now as like a collaboration tool. And I think that like, we had some moments where we've been like kind of stepping back and really like looking at just considering our purpose as a studio, and like thinking about where we want to go in the next 5 years. And we would do like these group exercises where everyone would kind of put down their answers to different prompts on like sticky notes, and then as a group, like 8 people, you'd see the mouse cursors flying all around, and in the end of that like 10 minutes, we'd end up with this like beautiful collection of organized ideas, and like people were barely talking during it. And so it was like it's like a new way to tap the group intelligence, kind of. Yeah. I see some questions in the.
Yeah, I think Tiffany wanted to ask in person. Let's see if that's possible.
I'll ask, and I hope it's not, sorry, I hope it's not a rude question, but I love the installation work. Is it difficult to find clients for this type of thing, or are there clients who have difficulty finding people like you?
Not a rude question at all. I think one of the challenges of doing the work is the cost of the work. And I think that like there's a mismatch in people's clients' perception of how much it costs to build some of these things, and like what they think it costs and how much it actually costs. And then, I think that has been a big challenge. And then also, like, to be totally honest, like just running a profitable business off of those projects can be challenging as well, because so much goes into the cost of building and engineering and designing it. I think like I saw a note from Brian about like maintenance, and like so much of the design cycle and the work can go into like creating a system that is stable and can be maintained. And so I think that's one of the big challenges, is like people are starting to find us more quickly, I think because the work is so public, but it's that like conversation and kind of selling the value of it can be challenging. Right? One thing is we've started working with a lot more real estate developers, which, I mean, at least in terms of like kind of like commanding a budget and then giving us creative freedom, in those two dimensions has been really great to work with them.
So are you saying before a lot of people would want to work with you, but once you tell them how much it costs, it's like,
There, there was a good amount of that. And I think like we're also learning how to sort of like come in different ranges of cost. Like, something like that, obviously that diffusion inquiry piece was really expensive. And we still get calls from like malls in Kazakhstan. A bit like all continents, have contacted us about building that piece. And when people find out how much it costs, they're kind of like, whoa. But we're learning to, for example, that other piece, the light one that you can text, like was way less expensive, and we were able to like with a smaller budget have a really nice impact on the space.
Michelle had a question, if you want to unmute.
Hey, so my question might seem kind of inconsequential, so I'm sorry for that. I've been following your work ever since 2012 when I saw the Reconstitution project and loved it. And I think you guys were using linguistic inquiry and word count. Is that right?
Yeah, totally. We were. Yeah.
So
no,
I just want to know how you found out about it and what you think about that tool.
Oh, wow. So I remember we learned about it like I know one of my partners was in touch with James Pennebaker at UT Austin, and like he had visited him, and maybe we were using it before that. I can't remember how we discovered it, but I mean, it was a really powerful tool, for a while to really like, especially when it came to like trying to kind of make these like more second order determinations of like kind of how honest someone was talking and things like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think it was a really.
Now, have you played around with it recently?
I'm trying to think of the last project we used it on. I don't think we have. I think it's been a little while since we've used that tool. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Are you like, do you work with that tool? Do you?
I've just been messing around with it recently for like little personal experiments, but I was in the MFA DT program at Parsons from 2010 to 2012. And your work, and also Lauren McCarthy's work, I see that she's on the call, were precedents of mine for my thesis. So I was really in awe of the projects that you all did using that tool, because I like reading.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, cool, awesome.
I love how we have alums present on the call and also alums of the Cloud Salon. Really
yeah.
nice. Maybe I have another question, Eric. Like you said, the haptic project that you showed from the Cooper Hewitt is kind of based on maybe some of your personal work or even your student work. And it was, I don't even know how to describe it. It's maybe smaller in scale, much more closer to the body. Maybe, I don't know how you want to talk about it, embodied or experimental. And I remember you also doing work with dance and things like that. Do you want to talk about this whole world or this part of your work a bit?
Yeah, sure. It came out of this, it came out of like master's work I did in 2001 at the Media Lab around like, how can you basically like design aesthetic experiences for your sense of touch? And it started with this crazy like bodysuit that I made, like that had little tactile actuators in it, and you could, through these different illusions, you could basically like draw shapes of vibration on your body and design them almost like a spatial music for your body. And I guess ever since then, I just had a series of experiments around like, how can you it's in some sense it's like a dance for the sense of touch. Like, how can you use the sense of touch spatially? And at one point I made this like kind of like bed that you lay back on called the organ. And it was like low frequency vibrations and like really like moving through your body, like these really intricate vibrations. And I guess the really amazing thing about it is like our sense of touch, because of like technological hurdles and because of societal hurdles, is like way underutilized, under-challenged, understimulated, all these things. Like, and when you sit down on like, like you could sit down on this organ thing, and never having ever felt anything like this before, you immediately can start to make sense out of layers of composition, like you would in a song, like the instruments of a song. And so I think that that was the start of all that, and it's kind of gone more into like almost like a storytelling direction for me. Like I'm thinking about now how like language and vibrations work together, and how by like seeding your imagination and providing like a very low resolution, low like kind of bit rate stuff to your body, you can create these like worlds of experience. And I think that's like what I'm excited about most. And as far as the piece goes, like I don't know that I've ever seen more joy like come out of like something that I've done before. Like why at the Cooper Hewitt, and then I showed it recently in at the Trap Hall Museum in Denmark, and it was like, it's like I didn't see anybody like sit down and not smile or like close their eyes and like kind of like get inside themselves. And it just like that got me excited. It got me really excited to like experience that. And then I had the opportunity in April, was it last spring, in the middle of Times Square, there was this public exhibit, and I made a new piece, was the same chairs from that other piece, but a microphone in the middle, and two people could sit down and speak into the microphone, and the sounds are translated into like these like tactile sensations in the seats of the chair. And it was like amazing. For a Saturday, I got to just like watch people walk up and try it out, and it was like an amazing experience to see the responses from it. So like such strong responses.
Lauren, you want to ask in person?
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, talking about the haptic stuff, I've just been following some research papers out of SIGGRAPH on these like insane, what you would probably call high fidelity haptics, like the sort of string system for the back of the hand that like restricts your grip, so you feel like you're like obviously can't get my hands on those, but I'm just curious, like, well, I have twofold question. Have you tried any of them? Do you think they're any good? And two, like, is anyone thinking about how, like, if it's too fidelity, like we might really scare people?
Oh yeah, so I haven't tried the latest stuff, and I actually haven't been tracking it, to be honest. Like I haven't been tracking it that much. I know like people are doing some insane stuff now, and there's a movie from like the 90s with, and who's in it? Is it Angelica Houston? And it's called, if I remember by the end, but it's about these like 3D TVs, and like people take these drugs so that they can actually feel what's happening on the TV, and it plays out this whole like scenario of that kind of thing, like how real can it get. And I think like actually it brings up an interesting theme that kind of translates to some of the other work that we do, is like that sometimes like exploring like low resolution displays, or like a single point, can really going deep on it can like actually be more convincing, because there's that uncanny valley you hit, right, where when you try to get too real, all of a sudden it's like not real or just bizarre. So I think I'm really interested in that. And like some of the sculptural work we do like gets into that, like visualizing data at like a really low resolution, just to give like a visceral sense of things in a room. But yeah, there's definitely some wild stuff going on right now in haptics.
Yeah, very applied question, I guess. Like, what is in the chair? It's haptic speakers. Like, how many of them? Or
so it's just one of those bass shakers that you put in your sofa for like feeling the explosions in movies, and that's it. It's like just a bass shaker, and then it's all being driven through sound. So there's like a channel of sound for the headphones, that's a voice, and then there's a channel of sound for the chair that is like the sensations that I composed. And so like the first version of this piece like literally ran off of a single iPod. It was just like splitting the channels out, and I just got like so excited for the like kind of the low techness of it. Yeah.
so maybe as a mini change of pace, I think maybe, well, there's probably more questions we can look at, but we had spoken earlier before the call, and you mentioned it also a little bit, kind of that being apart and with the studio, everybody being remote, it also was almost like a accelerator to think about what kind of work to do as a studio, personally, commercially, self-initiated. Can you talk a bit more about where this is at? I think this is also really relevant for students who might be graduating this year, etc. So.
Yeah. Okay. Well, where to start with that topic? Because I'm kind of in the weeds with it right now. I think, I've been reading Bruce Mao's new book, MC24. It's been really blowing my mind. It kind of came to my desk at the perfect time. And I think he talks about especially in the design field, the creative field, kind of sending out that beacon of what you really care about and what you really want to work on. And I think to some degree I felt like I personally haven't done that, and working with a bunch of other partners and kind of in some sense subsuming my own creative desires, or relegating them to late night sketchbook, kind of a late night art practice, has really been kind of done a disservice to my own practice and the studio as well. And so I think we're in the position right now after 10 years of operating as a commercial studio, really trying to tap into what we want to do and be more active in creating those opportunities. I think some of the projects I shown were self-initiated, but a lot of them were client driven. And I think if you find clients whose vision you share, you can do amazing stuff together, right? And it's almost like working on your own stuff because you're sharing a vision and you're sharing a set of sensibilities. But then I feel like I think we're about to step up some more of that, just putting our own work out there and figuring out how to sell it, and it's a different model. In some ways it is more of an art studio model. But I think we're interested now in shaping our own destiny and finding work in a more active way.
Any preview ideas of how that could look like?
Oh, right now it's a whole crap load of boards with sticky notes on them. So, but it's cool. I will say even in the work we're doing now, some of the client work, that our whole process is moving more towards that kind of group intelligence model, where we're designing the process of how the work is happening as designing the work itself. And I think that's something that I never had a formal design education. And so I kind of feel a little bit behind on that. But I think that idea of building a process where ideas can flower because of everyone's equal input, and not just one person making ideas and other people implementing them, but really drawing on the creative power of a group, that's where we're heading. Yeah.
I'm finding one more question in the chat from Kriti, I think, which was, are there more COVID-inspired projects coming out?
Oh, let me think. We've had to kind of, because just to keep the business running, we've had to turn the knob back towards doing a lot of client work at the moment. I'm trying to think are we working on any? I guess the sports stuff, some of that stuff is we're still actively pitching that. We actually did a bunch of thinking around conferences too, and how to connect people at virtual conferences that we're gonna release soon. Although it's been a few months, so a lot of it is actually, some of it people have started companies around some of the ideas, because everyone's effort and everyone's mind is on this right now. But yeah, check out anything we do work on. And also, if you guys have projects that are in this vein of send them to us, and we'll share them on the site. We'll share them on social media. That's something we've fallen a little bit behind on, but I'd love to still. It's togetherapart.sosolimited.com. Yeah, and we're always, reach out if you're interested in working on anything. Like we're like generally like looking for help on different kinds of projects. Our projects are all so different. We've been working with like, different groups and different freelance people on projects these days. So reach out for sure if you're interested.
I'll pick one question from Ava. Do you take time in researching for your projects, or is it mainly what the digital medium can do within a space?
So we traditionally have not taken enough time to research. And I think that's like doing like kind of, whether it's like audience or user research, or like researching a site, or I think we're pretty good at researching technology. We've got that down, but like in terms of the more humanistic elements of the project, it's something we've actually been actively stepping up. So like these days when a client calls and asks for us to kick off a project, we're actually kind of, saying that the way we work is we start with the research phase. And we did it recently with like a big technology company, and it's like so successful and so like amazing at how it like changed the shape of the project. Like we actually got to go around and interview people and talk to people, and like, or even like yesterday, I went to a site that we're about to work on to look at an LED screen, and like, like just throwing up like 3 dozen images on that screen in an hour gave us like such a like better idea of what actually feels good in the space. I guess that's more prototyping and less research, but we're definitely interested in stepping it up on the research side.
Hi, Richard, could I actually butt in maybe? Sorry.
No, absolutely, please. Yes.
Thank you. Hey, thanks for the talk. I hope I make sense because I'm actually coming in from London at the minute, so it's kind of late over here. But in terms of the research, do you think, I mean, you do create quite a lot of these digital sort of, pieces, projects, and it is all revolved around the human aspect of things. So I was wondering if you will actually dive in more into maybe the psychology of how people interact with these things. I think it's quite a valuable thing to maybe learn from in terms of creating more, in a sense, successful projects possibly. I don't know. Just wondering what your thoughts were in terms of the research, and if you will have a department that's on that. Yes. So.
Oh, that's a great question, a great point. I'm like personally been like diving deeper and deeper into like psychology and like just kind of like, emotional processing and like all that kind of stuff. And like, and I haven't yet, I think I started to tie it with, use it to inform the practice and the process and working with the team, but it hasn't made its way into the project work yet. But yeah, I mean, I love the idea as we grow and work on bigger projects that can support that, to make that a more explicit part of the process. I mean, that would be amazing. Yeah.
Just maybe to follow up, what do you think the future is of Sosolimited then? If you're thinking of these different projects. Sorry, it's such a broad question, of course, but maybe if you have any visions, especially after the pandemic, I don't know.
Yeah, I think, yeah, it's like we're kind of like right in the middle of that process of figuring it out, but things that are floating up to the surface are like, I think to basically like bring more purpose to the work and to really understand, I'll speak kind of like broadly to answer the question, but like to really focus more on impact. I think like as a firm, as a design firm, a creative shop, like I think it's easy to just get caught up in the object, and whether the object is the technology or it's the actual object or it's the design or whatever. And we've done that for a long time. And I think we're like turning our sights towards like the actual impact that the stuff is having in the world, like being more deliberate about it and holding ourselves accountable for like what impact we're having on a space. I think so a lot of the work we through intuition and fumbling and stumbling, like we ended up with pieces that did have a strong impact, but I think we're interested now in letting that drive the feedback on the design process from the moment we start a project.
Thank you.
Sure.
I'll let Richard take over.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's so interesting because, of course, we have always many different practitioners on the Cloud Salon, and maybe people that are studying in the DT program might be going down an artist career, or working for a company, or starting up their own studio in one way or another. So it's just always so interesting to hear how people are running their practice, and how to make it sustainable, and how to keep staying excited about the work that you're doing. I think we are already 2 minutes over. So I think we have to wrap up. If you all are interested, we usually have this mini tradition here, which is if you could turn on your mic, meaning unmute yourself, and we can give Eric a mini applause. And we can do this also maybe just with finger snipping. I don't know what we'll be hearing here. We're also getting a, here we go. Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining, everyone. And thanks for all the questions too.
This has been great. I'll just really quickly show the preview for the rest. As you can see, we have a big list of really cool people speaking. So next week we'll have Ramzi Nasser and a whole bunch of other people still speaking for the next couple of Fridays, including more collaboration with our collaborator for this semester, Black Beyond. Okay, awesome. Thank you, everybody.